Today's global tech outage has impacted 1 billion computers, according to an expert, and recovery could be a long, arduous process. That's coming up today on Business Matters. Good Friday afternoon, and thank you very much for being here with me. I'm your host, Don Ma, starting off with Wall Street. A bad day for tech around the world and a bad day for big tech down on Wall Street. Investors looks to be offloading their technology stocks, leaving the S&P 500 with its biggest weekly loss since April, and the Dow tumbling over 370 points today. The Nasdaq down 0.8%. But it looks to be a good day for Starbucks investors. Its stock up almost 7% today. And this is on the news that activist investor Elliott Management now has a stake in the company and will move to lift its share price. Nvidia stock down 2.6% in the tech sell-off. Now, let's talk about Microsoft here. Down a modest 0.7% despite the global tech outage of its Windows systems. But it seems like no such mercy here for CrowdStrike. This is the other tech company that is linked to the outage. Its shares down over 11% today. Now, they're calling it the largest IT outage in history. President Biden has been briefed on the impact, and the Department of Homeland Security is working with Microsoft and CrowdStrike to deal with system outages worldwide. So here's the latest. Portland's mayor has just declared a citywide state of emergency. City service systems and employee computers have been impacted. New York City, though, seems to be faring a bit better. Here's the mayor today.
Our city's IT and security teams, led by the Office of Technology and Innovation, have been working nonstop to troubleshoot problems and restore services.
So the outage forced all Social Security offices across America to close today, with some online services also down. Meanwhile, 30,000 flights have been delayed worldwide. Screens at airports showing nothing but a blue error screen. American Airlines, Delta Airlines, and United Airlines temporarily halting flights this morning, but recovering throughout the day. Couriers, FedEx, and UPS warning customers that their deliveries may be delayed. And when it comes to your money, well, JP Morgan Chase said ATMs are now up and running again, but some teller equipment is still down. Now, over in the UK, the outage knocked one of England's largest news channels offline. Right now, we're bringing in our live guest, Carl Szabo. He's the Vice President and General Counsel for NetChoice, and he's also the Professor of Internet Law at George Mason University. Now, Carl, I hope sincerely that you weren't impacted by the outage today. How are you doing?
Doing well. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for my family and many Americans and people across the world who are stuck at airports right now due to this outage.
Right. I mean, yeah, who's to take responsibility here for what happened? We have Microsoft, CrowdStrike, potentially others.
I mean, right now, of course, Microsoft is trying to point the finger at CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike seems to be the main cause of the breakdown, but simultaneously, Microsoft is the one who has integrated CrowdStrike into its Windows operating system, into its cloud services. So I think both are at fault, really, for this. But I think we should also see this as an opportunity. It is horrible what happened, but we need to recognize that this shows that we have a single point of failure across many different parts of our world. We see it in the airlines, we see it in the banks, we see it in hospitals, we see it in 911 calls that are going unanswered right now because of this breakdown. And so what we need is diversification. You don't put all your eggs in one cybersecurity basket, but that seems to be what we've done by putting all of our cybersecurity eggs in the Microsoft basket.
And on your point here, I'm just imagining all the things that could have potentially happened with this outage. I mean, you mentioned a single point of failure. I mean, luckily it didn't cause any national security implications that we've heard of, but in your view, that could have potentially happened.
Absolutely. An overwhelming percentage of our government, the US government, operates on the Microsoft system. And this isn't a secret. the US Cybersecurity Review Board just released a report outlining the repeated cybersecurity failures of Microsoft and the simple fact that so many government systems, not just here in the US, but all across the world, operate on Microsoft means that we should really start dotting some I's and crossing some T's and looking underneath the hood when it comes to the cybersecurity promises that Microsoft has made and start asking, are they really the best provider? Or should we look to competitors and increase diversification to make sure that something like what we're seeing today never happens again?
Okay, so on your point of diversifying, let me ask you this. So you're saying we should diversify, but doesn't this diversifying across multiple vendors, make it expensive as well? And diversification also could introduce new security challenges too, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Anytime you bring on a new system or a new service, it is going to increase your costs initially. But what you also need to look at is what are the long-term costs of having a huge failure like the one we're seeing today. Target's a great example of this. When they had their famous data breach a couple of years ago, it took them months, if not years, to recover from that cybersecurity failure, costing them billions of dollars in actual losses as well as potential customers and reputational harm. So every business has to ask itself, what is the likelihood of a cybersecurity risk? And what we are seeing is, today's a great example, it's getting worse. And then you have to ask yourself, is that greater or less than the cost of the additional site or service and that additional belt and suspenders on your existing systems?
Okay, let me ask you on diversifying as well, because it could introduce other security risks. So we have to weigh the pros and cons of the security risks of not diversifying versus diversifying. So what do you think?
Yeah, and that's what businesses do every single day. They are looking for the most efficient, most secure, and most cost-effective systems. And sometimes those are perfectly aligned, sometimes they're not. And the good news is when it comes to businesses, the free market will figure out where the money should go and what systems should win. But unfortunately, when it comes to government procurement, I'm looking at the military. I'm talking about the U.S. Executive branch. We're talking about the U.S. legislature. Too many of our government systems operate on only one provider. And one of the things we have seen repeatedly from Microsoft is the ability to engage with what's called vendor lock. It's to make it really, 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 really hard for a business, or in this case, government, to choose a site or service that is more secure and more cost effective. So what we need is for government to begin looking under the hood before it buys a Microsoft product and really ask themselves, is this what is best for security? Is this what is best for American taxpayers?
Okay, 20 seconds. What do we use besides Microsoft?
Yeah, you got tons of options. You got Oracle, you got Amazon AWS, you got Google Cloud, just to name three. And there are dozens of other competitors out there. More competition, more diversification, better security.
All right, Carl, thank you so much for your insight today. A pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, so we wanted to cover all possible angles on this outage. So that is why earlier I also spoke to cybersecurity advisor at My Smart Privacy, Rex Lee, for more. All right, Rex, thank you very much for your time today, as always. A lot has been said already about this topic, but what is your angle on it?
Well, what's going on with the Microsoft CrowdStrike outage today is a direct result of what is termed as internet centralization. Well, a lot of people will say, well, how's the internet been centralized? Well, it's centralized through three companies. Today, there's only three companies that control global access to internet trade and commerce, and that's Alphabet, the parent company of Google, Microsoft, and Apple. And the vulnerabilities with that are single choke points out through the network that can take down millions of customers. So this is the problem, and this is exactly what happened today with CrowdStrike. A software update went out with a bad kernel, so we're being told. They're saying that this isn't a cybersecurity attack, but it had the same net result as a cybersecurity attack. And that bad kernel caused over 1 billion computers to lose access to back office systems supported by the company, because the companies that are in fact that are involved, and also countries. These are we're talking about government agencies. We're talking about Fortune 500 businesses, airlines. Today, you couldn't even watch ESPN. They were down for a while. And they had their radio program on cable. So the cascading effects of this is unbelievable.
A billion computers. Can you give us some perspective on this number?
Well, if you want to know what it's costing, if you just simply said we're losing $1 per second in productivity when you aggregate all of the computers and companies that are affected, and I think it's higher than that, we're losing $1 billion in financial transactions a second right now. This is unbelievable. You're talking about, like, with ESPN, advertisers who are losing advertising dollars because of this. And worst of all, if you look at critical infrastructure that's being affected, this is actually going to cause harm, and people may be dying as a result of this, because first responders are being affected, hospitals are being affected. We won't know the total damage from all this, but this is going to go down in history. If it hasn't already, it'll go down in history as the largest mistake and or outage in the history of the internet. I mean, this is unbelievable today.
Can you tell us if you see this internet centralization situation, is that going to get worse?
Oh, the bad guys know this. When you talk about tech-based hybrid warfare waged by adversarial countries, they know this. This is the problem with allowing a handful of companies to control global access to internet trade and commerce. When I speak at seminars on this topic, I ask companies and governments, what's your cloud exit strategy or your centralized internet strategy for critical infrastructure? Because 20 years ago, maybe even less, 15 years ago, companies operated on local area networks and wide area networks, LANs and WANs that were protected, and the companies owned and controlled their own data. Today, they've moved everything into the cloud. And the cloud is not controlled by the companies necessarily. They control their own access to the cloud. But what's happening is the cloud is controlled by a few companies. Well, if there's a choke point within that infrastructure that can go down, it can cause a billion computers to lose access to their networks. And we're seeing that today. At one time, there was probably over 30, maybe 40 wireless carriers in the entire United States. Today, there's only 3. A lot of people say, well, you have Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T, but a lot of people don't realize that they own the infrastructure that Cricket, Metro PCS, Boost, and other carriers operate off of. So there's only 3 telecommunication providers basically controlling telecommunications, and we have that in the internet today. And these choke points, when they go down, everybody's being affected by this today.
Always a great discussion with you. Thank you. And staying on this, NTD spoke with some of those affected by the outage. Take a look.
A vast tech outrage shuts down industries across the globe. Airlines, banks, hospitals all see the blue screen of death. The cause? A faulty software update from cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike.
We're deeply sorry for the impact that we've caused to customers.
CrowdStrike founder and CEO George Kurtz choking up during an interview with Today.
When you look at the complexity of cybersecurity, you're always trying to stay one step ahead of the adversaries. Excuse me. Man, just 1 second, please.
The faulty software update crashed computers across the globe, preventing devices from working.
My audition that I'd handed in remotely the evening before didn't actually get to its intended recipient, the casting director.
Wasim Mirza is a former BBC reporter currently working as a film actor. He says the acting business is now largely remote, and it depends very much on technology.
A lost audition is ultimately lost business for me and many other actors who now rely on remote auditioning for both voice and screen work. And so this is a real concern for us in the industry.
Mirza circumvented the outage by using other apps to send the audition. But things weren't so simple for the research firm Infotech Research Group.
A lot of our customers that we service had to cancel their meetings that they had scheduled with us today because they were dealing with their stuff, the same thing on their end.
Executive Counselor Eric Avakian says Infotech had a great communication plan, with its service desk constantly giving updates and telling people how to resolve the issue. Though this didn't help traveling employees.
We've got folks out in the field, folks that are doing workshops, folks that are out there visiting customers, and they're trying to get back home. They might be at the airport. And we did have that this morning where folks couldn't get where they needed to go because even the airlines were having issues.
Airlines weren't the only things that weren't working.
The trains were not working, the NHS was not working, Sky TV was not working earlier today.
Alina Timofeva is a strategic advisor to banks in the UK. She says the day has been hectic.
One of the biggest challenges for me was helping the banks make the payments, because obviously when you have tens of thousands of angry customers who can't make the payment even for the food, then you get a bit of a problem.
Timofeva says that after this outrage, companies may need to take action to avoid future concentration risk.
All right, taking a break now, but coming up afterwards, commercial real estate is being affected here, and we're going to take a look at what's the problem. We'll talk about it after the break. Stay tuned. And welcome back. As I was saying, commercial real estate is becoming a real headache for U.S. regional banks. Now, since the pandemic, many offices have adopted some form of remote work and no longer need to rent so much office space. So this is a big issue for landlords who rely on the rental to pay back their mortgage. And higher rates have also made refinancing very tough. Now banks are upping provisions to cover potential defaults, some such as M&T Bank even reducing its exposure to the sector. Meanwhile, multifamily commercial loan portfolios, which by the way are usually made by smaller US lenders, they have shown signs of strain in big markets such as New York and Florida due to rent control regulations. Now, could what's happening in the Florida housing market be a sign of things to come for other parts of America? A recent report from Resi Club showing almost 70% of Florida home builders found June slower than expected and causing concern. So during the pandemic, with so few houses on the market, builders rushed to take advantage of the rising prices. But now that mortgage rates are much higher, demand for homes is lower. Prices are still steady or rising slowly in most parts of the country, but not in certain parts of Florida. That's not the case. If you compare the metropolitan areas in the US where homes are selling below asking price, 8 out of 10 of the worst hit areas are in Florida. So to get the latest on exactly what is happening in the Sunshine State, I spoke with Jeff Musgrave, owner of the Musgrave Group. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a while since we spoke. So tell me if you're seeing this widespread price cuts in markets in Florida. Tell us what the picture looks like.
Yes, so what we're seeing down here is a lot of price cuts. We're seeing that buyers looking to purchase homes, they're waiting until they see at least 1 or 2 price reductions on a property value before they're comfortable moving forward with either a showing or an offer. So we have some statistics where, this last week we've had about 92 properties hit the market here in West Central Florida. And on top of that, we've had 91 price reductions as well. So you're seeing the same amount of properties coming to market, and then the properties already on the market, we're having that same number just in price decreases in the last week.
If you could pinpoint a specific reason as to why we're seeing this, what would you say?
Well, obviously, everybody's going to point to the interest rates. We're also seeing inventory starting to catch back up. It's not quite there yet, but we are seeing everybody coming into summer wants to list their home in summer. They want to move when their kids are out of school. So you have that influx of inventory that usually hits the market during summer. We haven't seen that influx of buyers. That's most likely due to the interest rate, the inflation rate, cost of living has just gone up. Insurance rates in Florida have gone up. All of those things have kind of come together to kind of stagnate and stall out the market here a little. We're getting a lot of out-of-state still investment.
So what we're seeing in Florida, would you say that is a representative at all of the nationwide situation?
I would say we are a little detached from what's going on around the country. We are sort of unique, though, as where there's a huge insurance crisis in the state of Florida, and that's causing payments to skyrocket for a lot of homeowners. I have one homeowner, we just listed their home. Their insurance rates tripled over the course of the last year to this year, and so they just can't afford their payments. So you're seeing a lot of people hit the market and getting out of real estate because insurance rates are getting so elevated. So to answer your question, I think like we saw in the last recession, Tampa and Florida, Central Florida, particularly Tampa, was the last to kind of feel the effects of the recession and the housing bubble. I think this is a similar situation where we're a little detached because we are Florida. Everybody wants to come here and live in Florida. So I think that has supported our market kind of staying strong over the last year to 2 years, while we saw other markets in the Northeast, Midwest start to lower prices already. We're now just coming into that.
So I would assume that it's taking much longer now, right, to sell a home?
Yes. For example, we just sold a home. It took 120 days to close, from listing to close. Typically, those times, obviously 2 years ago, you'd be 24 hours on market, you'd have 40 offers. That's not the case. Typically, your home is sitting on the market for 1 to 3 weeks. We get a price drop, and then we start getting activity on the home, and then there's typically negotiating coming down after that.
All right, Jeff, maybe just one more thing here. I'm just thinking about the opportunities right now in this market. Do you think we've hit a bottom?
I don't think we've hit the bottom of where we're going to see prices go. I do think that we're going to see a sharp decline in values coming out of buying season into, the winter months. But then I think a lot of that is going to depend on where the geopolitical, situation goes with the election in the United States for the president, and where people's confidence is going in the direction of the country moving forward.
Is there any optimism on the horizon?
Optimism. I think so. Everybody is kind of holding out to see what goes on with some of the things regarding the political scenarios in the United States. We're coming out of buying season right now, so the market typically would slow down and cool off coming into your holiday, your Thanksgiving, November, December, January. So we're already expecting it to slow down a little bit more.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight today, Jeff.
Yes, thank you so much, Don.
And finally, Mongolia's national uniform for the Paris 2024 Olympics is dazzling the City of Lights. So the outfits feature embroidered vests, pleated robes, and accessories inspired by traditional attire. Based in the capital of Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar, the label produces couture and ready-to-wear garments. Designers hope that they express the essence of Mongolian tradition and culture. The brand calls the Olympic attire contemporary light, and the Mongolian National Olympic Committee says each outfit took 20 hours to craft. All right, and that's all the stories we have for you today and for the week. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any feedback for the episode, please feel free to let me know. You can email us at business@ntd.com and leave a comment online if you wish. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you back here on Monday.